I'm really glad we are finishing the first portion of panels on this topic, because I think if we cast our minds back to what we've heard throughout this morning, we've covered quite a range of topics. There are several strands that connect them, but one of which is, of course, collaboration. I think we've heard in many different guises and statements how people is the challenge. It's the people that we're in the line of. It's the people that we need to work on. And of course, the assumption on which this panel rests is that the most successful organizations today and moving forward are the ones that will collaborate best. There's obviously a huge question mark on what does collaboration actually mean? What does it look like? What's IT's role in that? And as you may have heard, we have IT security and data leaders in the panel with us. So it'll be interesting to compare and contrast that as well. But I want to start there. From your perspectives, assuming that the best organizations collaborate the best, what is your understanding, what's your individual understandings of what the IT functional role is in enabling that? Who wants to go first?
I can do that. So I think from my experiences, not just the most recent one at Wrench, but I was talking to Eric last evening about the work and the cultural shift and change that John Golden brought to CNA when he left Ameritech as CIO and came to CNA back in the early aughts. And from those experiences, to the degree that IT can drive the business capabilities conversation as a part of a business architecture layer of services, you now find a bridge between, we talk about all the time, IT needs to speak the language of the business. So, if you understand the strategy of the business and the capabilities that bring that strategy to life, and the technology then that enables those capabilities, and you walk in and you lead with the conversation about business capabilities first, technology second, you're leaning into the conversation with the business community, CFO, CMO, COO, CXO. And I think that lays a framework and foundation for they understand our world and seek to improve it by this, that, or the other from a technology perspective. That has been my experience. We nailed it at CNA back in the early aughts, and I just take that with me, and I try to encourage other organizations, as I left CNA back in whatever year that was, 2005, to adopt that business architecture mindset when talking about IT-enabled capabilities.
Okay, I think on top of that, one of the big things I think is you have to embrace change. You can't wait for it to start permeating through the organization. If you don't do that, then you're going to have shadow ITs or stuff like that. You have to actually be on the forefront of the technology and bringing it to the business and bringing it to the end user piece of it. And I think on top of that, I think also you have to be one of the proponent of change. Bring the changes to the end user, bring the changes to the business leaders, and say, hey, here's what we have to help you pull your business piece forward. Outside of that, you're relying on them to piecemeal things, and sometimes that doesn't really work. You end up spending more money, whereas you could actually be that change of enablement to bring new technologies and bring new processes in. What do you think, Francis?
So one of the things that we've adopted, so to speak, over the course of the last 5 years was just establishing that the whys and the whats from the various businesses that we have to service. That's on them, and we take on the how. And so effectively, one of the analogies or metaphors that we've used is they can have all the trains that they want, but we provide them the rails. So we also have to orchestrate how each train courses through whatever destination, through the rails that we provide the business. So that collaboration, I think, has been very instrumental in getting us to where we were at. But we're also cognizant around what got us to where we are now as the largest bank in the Philippines is not going to take us to where we want to be in the next, because we want to also transform or sorry for using the word, but we have to change. We continue on that journey of being better and better and better. So
and then essentially guardrails.
Yes,
So,
absolutely.
Yeah. Another kind of spin on collaboration is if you would have asked that question 5 years ago, it might look even a little bit different because now I think we're challenged to collaborate in even a completely different environment. We have a policy, work anywhere as long as your manager can support it and you can do your job. So that leaves us with associates all around the world, and helping them to have the tools or the ability to collaborate is completely different. And, it's not even just a partnership. I mean, that's just table stakes, agree with everything said, but just helping other parts of the business. We might have a product development team, or we have a very large ERP, and we're talking about hundreds of people that need to work together, but not being in the same physical location. And so this is where I think the hybrid meeting space and how do people work together. Have you guys ever been in one of those meetings where you're like outside trying to raise your hand to get attention with 10 people in the room and they've got the presentation and they take the space? I feel like there's an opportunity for us to think about like inclusive behaviors, or how do we facilitate meetings differently? How do we make sure that we have the right home and meeting experiences within the office so that people can still be effective?
What's interesting there is you've got a level of proactivity that you can employ on the one hand, and then the reactive nature to external pressures. Yeah. And I think that's a very interesting dichotomy. Laine, I'll come to you last on that particular question.
I love the idea of business architecture and leveraging a business strategy to that business architecture. Not technical architecture alone, but business architecture and technology related into that. I would also say that for me, for data and analytics, representing the data part of this story, data is no longer just a byproduct of business. I would say data is an opportunity for collaboration within organizations through insights, through innovation, through growth, through new opportunities. So I think there's a really interesting opportunity right now for everybody in technology and data to really work together, security as well, to create new opportunities for organizations. I will say one thing that I think is amiss in a lot of kind of technology shops is the distance between those working in technology and the customer can sometimes be really far away. So having a culture of understanding your customer is really important, I think, for everybody in an organization to really be collaborative.
I think that knowledge is really interesting because one of the big elephants in the room when it comes to collaboration is we've got now working from home policy that seems to be so different, not just within different organizations in one city, but all over the world. There doesn't seem to be a right or wrong way of doing it. We have multiple newsreels discussing this organization is bringing back 5 days a week, this organization is being far more flexible. And I think the one thing that we've understood about the working from home policy, back to your point around understanding, is we didn't actually know how people work, or at least to the point that we thought we did. And so I've got a question for the audience. We need a show of hands. Which of you in the audience is in an organization that has a working from home policy that can bring you into the office 3 days a week, 2 days a week? Yeah.
A couple days a week, that would be interesting.
Yeah.
Oh.
That's roughly half by my A-level maths and eyesight.
Scan the room.
Yeah, absolutely. Does that surprise you on the panel? I mean, are we surprised with this?
For us, but I'm happy that that's available. During 2020, in a span of so obviously everybody had to go on lockdown, right? For me and for the rest of my team, we all had to go back in just within 6 weeks. And that's been sort of return to office since then up to now.
Right.
And I feel like what Laine mentioned earlier is I guess it's a consequence of who our customers are and how they interact with us, because we're a branch-heavy organization. Therefore, we need to have that face-to-face time with them. Therefore, majority of the resources in the organization of 40,000 people have to be in office. And therefore, the whole benefit or privilege of working remotely, it's something that while it's an adoption to how the markets are, as a collaboration capability, it's been sought as, it's more important for us to be in
Right.
the office to collaborate better, not just within, but also externally.
And what are the questions that you're hearing from the rest of the business in order to enable them to collaborate? Are they directly going, look, we need the tech team here to help us with this directly, and here's what we want them to do? Or is it a case of, we've got these problems, no idea how to solve them, and you're assuming and taking on board that it's a collaborative or collaboration challenge?
I push my team to always ask, what is the problem we're trying to solve? Because when I get really nervous when our internal customers come in and they say, here's the thing I want you to do. I want to understand what we're trying to solve. And we can advise and we can consult on the 10 different ways that can happen. And what's important for right now, given the environment. Is it cost? Is it time? Whatever those options are that we're trying to work within. And making sure that our technologists are part of those conversations and at the table when decisions are made on how something actually gets approached.
Yeah. And I think, Laine, it's not just the problem we're trying to solve, but what are the problems the other teams are trying to solve? What are the problems they're facing? So I always ask, who's working with the other project teams? If one of my past organization, IT and development organization, didn't talk, and there were constant issues. But there were no one on either side that were talking to each other. So I think it's really important not to ask that question within our teams, but also, externally with our other business partners as well.
In a security context, just to keep that in mind, what is a good collaborative team and workforce look like to enable a secure culture? Like, what are you aiming for?
Well, from my perspective, I've heard it a couple times this week. It's like, hey, security breaks a lot of things. But on the other flip side of that, we're also a business enabler. We, on the Schneider Electric side, we're not a critical infrastructure company, but we're a critical infrastructure vendor. So we have to be able to see what the customers are asking for. So that means we're talking to our product teams, seeing what the customers are asking, and what are the questions they're most interested in, and how we're trying to solve that, and also be transparent with our issues and how we're trying to solve that and push that externally. So we have regular conversations with our sales team, not me personally, but we have those focus groups with internally as well to find out what the field teams are seeing, and then we take that internally and trying to evangelize that within the team. So without that interaction, we'd just be kind of going along and solving problems based off whatever framework we're working off.
And last point, what's a common frustration, or what's the biggest frustration for you?
I would say that our questionnaires are too long. So, and it goes both ways. Unfortunately, I mean, it is part of. We were joking that this last conference that AI is supposed to go fix all these issues for us around questionnaires and around those kind of third party areas. So I think that's right now the biggest frustration.
Laine, I'll come to you next. Data representation on the panel, as it were. Same questions. What is the kind of the remit of the data team in enabling the collaboration pain points that the rest of the business are sharing?
I think it's having a mix of really data savvy individuals who can work with our businesses and be able to ingest that into the organization. I really believe in a federated model where we're kind of teaching people to fish how to use these technologies, like from the point of consumption, so that they can think differently. It's that mindset shift within the organization when it comes to how to use data and data technologies in your day-to-day to get further faster.
Yeah. And any stories or anecdotes come to mind in enabling that?
Yeah, I will say, I'll pick on just the audience we have. I mean, I feel like some of the things that we have tried to do, the biggest thing is like, how do we operate with speed? Like, how do we do things quickly and go at the speed of business? There's always so much demand and it's pent up. We don't have enough resources to do everything. We're prioritizing, but making sure that we're doing things with the least amount of risk. So partnering with security to do that, sometimes that can be a challenge. Like, we've got to go faster, right? Working within the guardrails of a technology organization can be really tricky as well. Again, we're working on cloud. The guardrails you're putting in place for cloud, we're going faster than you are. Like, those are some of the dynamics I think that I've seen be a struggle just in terms of being able to deliver with speed. And I think it calls for a unique partnership between data security technology teams to make sure we're enabling each other to move quickly in an organization to really provide and drive value. Because at the end of the day, if we're not doing that, then we're not doing our jobs.
I suppose it's hard to do that in times where the speed at which we're changing, as has already been discussed, is hyper quick.
Absolutely.
And quickening again. So you sort of fall to those established lines and modes of communication. It takes, I suppose, a certain kind of grit almost in order to sort of do the day job and then push through and augment or imagine what a new series of collaborations could look like.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's a matter of really driving, again, those capabilities in an organization in the right way, with some frameworks in place, with some enablers in place to let them go and do on their own, but having that governance. I know not everybody likes that word, but those standards in place and capabilities that are enterprise, where you're going to get efficiencies out of them, reusability, et cetera, the right security standards in place, but really like teaching people that these things are possible and really driving those innovations out into your organization.
Robin, we've heard from data, we've heard from security. From a CIO perspective, do those track with your experience working with the data teams, or have you got a different understanding?
No, it's a really good question. At Shure, I am responsible for IT, but I also have cybersecurity, and then I have some elements, not data governance or data enablement, now that we're going to call it that. That's outside of IT, and that's intentional. But yeah, I mean, there's some friction sometimes between those three organizations. I mean, from a security perspective, I always try to make it a business decision. It's a balance between productivity and security. And at the end of the day, that's about how much risk we want to assume. And so I try to go about that in a partnership way to have those conversations. From a data perspective, similar. I think speed is a challenge in that sometimes you're moving a mountain and then the expectation is to see results faster. So, but because the three report to me, you would think it's easy because it's all in one area, but it's not. It's different leaders, and so I'm still consolidating. And I created this board, I guess. I call it a security board, but it's where my data lead, my security lead, and my infrastructure lead, we meet once a month just to kind of talk through some of these things so they don't grow in a way that it's harder to manage.
So one of the things I always bring up is security and functionality are kind of inverse of each other, right? Mm-hmm. So you have to maintain that balance, and it's really important that you have open lines of communication, because the things you want to implement in security doesn't always mean that it's going to make your business any better or faster, and in some cases actually slow it down. So where is that balance? And it's, again, really important to make sure you're talking to your business partners, have that transparency between our groups and also the open lines of communication back and forth.
Robert, with the benefit of reflection and having retired, a little bit less skin in the game, what has worked in the past when trying to establish some of these modes of collaboration that we've heard from security, data, and your peers?
Yeah, I was fortunate in my last role. I owned, as the CIO, data information security, data privacy, process architecture, enterprise architecture. It all rolled into me because I designed the organization that way from the start. So I probably didn't have as many challenges perhaps as the others on the panel in influencing collaboration. But at the end of the day, I think if you can move away, and I think the word you used was framework, if I'm not mistaken, if you can move away from relying heavily on behaviors and institute, process and framework and give people an arena to work within, which needs to be malleable, right? You need to have give and take. But that's the energy behind, optimization, right? What I encouraged our team on the data side, when we have those communication and conversations with the business community, with the business architecture layer or a placemat, if you will, is let's talk so much about data with our business stakeholders. Let's talk about information and knowledge, because in the perfect world, your data is producing information that produces knowledge, that produces wisdom, which is a lot of the automation that we're seeing today with Gen AI experimentation is getting to that wisdom, nirvana place faster. And I think that contributed to our ability to move the needle. To your point about, tell me what the why is, tell me what the what is, and the way we defined what was capabilities. We'll help you, or we'll come back to you with ideas on the how, and we'll talk about what the timing of the delivery of how will be in order to move the needle on the maturity of the what. And I think that went a long way for us, especially in a very acquisitive organization where we're constantly acquiring new companies and trying to bring them into our world, if you will. Creating that homogeneous process, like we called it, process harmonization, but that was a friendlier word than process standardization, and it worked. I mean, we had, I made a comment in a conversation yesterday about, we had data stewards at all of our brands, and they knew they were data stewards, and they were contributing to the data normalization that was necessary to move the needle on delivering better information to the business, not just from a reporting perspective, but actionable, business decisions.
Yeah. Now, this conversation could have been extrapolated into a half a day discussion. We've mentioned and touched upon the future of hybrid work and the future of work. And that rests on understanding your organization and its teams and how they operate. That gets complicated when we've got a multi-generational workforce with different expectations, different working models, and frankly, different expectations of everything, to be honest, if what I'm hearing is correct. That means then that, I suppose, to your point about wisdom, knowledge of the workforce is going to be critical, of your own workforce, is critical in actually enabling a collaborative one. I want to end on a question, because I think sometimes they're more important than answers. What's the big question you're asking yourself then in this context, moving forward, that you think the audience should be asking themselves too?
I'll dive in real quick. I was at a conference 2 years ago. Lee Cockrell from Disney presented. He said the biggest challenge that business has today is clarity of expectation. And I think when it comes to managing generations of professionals, specifically in IT, there's different, people are coming to the company, they're coming to work with different expectations. And I think as a leader, having that clarity of expectation, understanding theirs, and for them to understand yours and the organization, I think is paramount in mentoring, coaching, and helping people grow their careers. Because we're in a very interesting time, in our history of commerce and business. We've got multi-generational, people are staying longer, right? And we've got people coming out of school or technical school that are commanding some salaries that, are eye-popping, right? Prompt engineers, what are they going for these days? So that multi-generational, understanding the expectations of that multi-generational workforce, I think is extremely important. Back in the day, 100 years ago when I was at EDS, we called it wisdom about human nature. And I think that the magnifying glass is needed for that today more than ever.
Okay. Anyone want to take the next?
I'd say for me, one of the challenges that we've had was the fact that multi-generational presence in the organization has either been who injects a change, who wants a change, and where do they want to lead their business to. So as part of IT, it's always, you guys want, talking to the business, if you want this result and you want to get to that endpoint, and we tell you how to get to that point, you have to have the ability to adopt or adapt to whatever technology that's available. But then there's this restriction or there's this resistance because they view it as, we want to do things the way we've always been doing it. Just give us a tech to allow us to do the same thing. But then modernization doesn't do it that way. Modernization is literally allowing you to, I guess I'll use the same word, reimagining how to get to the same destination, just rerouting it. Maybe we build a new highway, maybe we build a new subway or whatever. You can't take the same horse and buggy to the same destination. So that's one of the biggest sort of questions on how do we get the folks from business to rethink the destination from point A to point B, and how can they accept that new destination?
How do they speak your language?
I think these are good problems to have, that there's a lot of things that we could do in our company. And so we tend to take on or have a difficult time saying no to some of these opportunities. And so then we initiate maybe too many things. And I think this was brought up this morning about trying to manage the workload of the IT team, because there's great demands on that, and there's only so much investment that you should put in IT. So just balancing out, making sure that we say yes to the right things as a company, and those are things that we can absorb and execute against, not just within IT, but beyond IT, but we do tend to be a little bit of a bottleneck. So, it does worry me that we could burn out that team. And when you look across the generation, we'll be celebrating 100 years this year. So we do have, a very long cross, type of population, and people have different appetites for how much they want to work now and what they want to put into it. So I think it's just balancing all that out.
Okay. Yeah, I think I wanted to combine both Robert's and Francis. I think managing expectations. There's a lot of demands, particularly now. You turn around, there's a new law. It's a new regulation. It's something else. It's an update to a framework. There are demands from the board. There are demands from your C-suite. There's demands from your end user population to make things easier, to make things a little more transparent, a little easier, frictionless, if you will. The security side. So within our teams, realizing that there's always going to be several, if not hundreds of priority ones. What are the most important ones, not just for business, because obviously business needs to make money for us to have jobs, but also for us to maintain our humanity, if you will. You can't work 60 hours a week for a month straight, with the exception of COVID. But there are things that you need to be able to translate from our priority list that go down to your teams and also to the business side. And make sure that, again, you have an open lines of communication to set expectations correctly.
Laine, your question?
Yeah, my frame of mind around this is around creating a workforce that has digital dexterity. And that means for all of the innovations we're putting out, technologies that we're putting out, people can adapt to them. I think the biggest failure in IT that I've seen in my experience is user adoption. And so really working to build up a workforce that is data literate and they understand the capabilities that we're bringing to them. But frankly, there are also some self-service capabilities, right? Because the demands on IT and on data and on security are not going down. So we've got to do something different. We've got to work differently. And so driving that digital dexterity so that all levels of the organization, generations, et cetera, are starting to adapt and be users and consumers themselves, but also driving some of those capabilities where it makes sense within those frameworks, I think is really important for us going forward.
Yeah, there was one word that we've been talking and using quite a lot this year, and it's resilience. So it's not just on your business resilience, it's also your team resilience as well. So that fits right in with your conversation there, Laine.
Fantastic. Well, thank you all for that. I've got one question I'm going to leave with the audience too, if I may. I think one thing I've heard is the understanding of who your people are, what they do, why they do it. seems to be the cognizant way of understanding how to collaborate. So if you're not investing in your people, if you're not investing in who they are and the knowledge of what they're doing, are you fully able to get the benefit of the innovation that you're investing in to enable business transformation or BAU or enablement? So I think that's one thing I'm curious about moving forward. But I'll end there. Thank you very much.